My brother secretly used our shared inheritance authority to borrow against the family property, leaving me with $87,000 in debt and our childhood home foreclosed. I was Marcus Calloway, his brother, and now an unwilling borrower. The balance was already accruing interest, and the damage threatened the credit score I needed for my security clearance at work. Ignoring it wasn't an option. I didn't call him. I opened a spreadsheet and started a forensic audit, color-coding every discrepancy until I had something impersonal enough for a PowerPoint. Then I found the bank-issued promissory notes. They bore my real signature, repurposed from a hospice living expenses document. But the account was in my name, and I had never known it existed. How was I supposed to obtain its bank records legally? The answer was buried inside the fraud itself. The bank's default department confirmed that my social security number and authenticated signature made me a borrower of record. If an account listed me as an owner, I was legally entitled to its records. My brother had embedded my identity deeply enough to trap me, but in doing so, he had also given me access to the chain. I froze my credit before doing anything else. Then I downloaded the full report, saved the bank PDFs in read-only folders, and duplicated everything to an encrypted drive. I labeled the notes red for authenticated exposure. Yellow was unresolved. Blue was family history, meaning emotionally relevant and legally useless until proven otherwise. There was already one blue item I couldn't stop thinking about. At Grandma's funeral, my brother had worn a new Rolex. He kept extending his wrist while he talked, as if grief had somehow changed the dimensions of his sleeve. "A client gave it to me," he'd said. I'd believed him, because the alternative would have required asking a direct question, and direct questions have never been my strength. I can identify a discrepancy at 3 decimal places. I can rehearse a conversation for 2 hours and still send an email instead. Now the watch moved from blue to yellow. A lawyer I knew agreed to let me send a narrowly worded records demand on his letterhead with his authorization. It did not accuse my brother. It requested preservation and production of the complete loan file, including applications, signature pages, account opening documents, disbursement instructions, notices, and records for any receiving account on which I appeared as an owner. That restraint took effort. I wanted to write, "My brother stole my identity and our house." Instead, I wrote, "Please preserve all records relating to the above-referenced borrower and collateral." Financial jargon is useful that way. It lets panic wear a tie. The county property records arrived first. I had expected one bad loan, maybe an emergency refinance my brother had concealed because he intended to repay it. Instead, the recorder's index showed 3 refinances spread across nearly a decade. The first had been modest enough to look plausible. The second extracted more equity. The third took nearly everything left in the house. Each loan increased the amount secured against the property. Each one relied on the same underlying authority. Each one repeated my signature in places where I had never placed it. I deleted the worksheet titled Single Loan and replaced it with Property Ledger. That was the moment the shape changed. One reckless act can come from fear. 3 refinances over almost 10 years are a system. The settlement statements showed where the money had gone. None of the equity disbursements had paid hospice expenses. None had gone toward repairs. None had been distributed to estate beneficiaries. After fees and prior balances, every available dollar flowed to the same account. The account number was unfamiliar. The account opening card was not. It named my brother and me as joint owners. It used my social security number. It carried the same signature lifted from the hospice document. And every statement had been directed to a post office box in Nevada. I had never lived in Nevada. I had never rented a post office box there. I had never opened that account. For several minutes, I stared at the ownership line. My name looked ordinary. That offended me more than the forged loan documents. The lie had been formatted so neatly. Marcus Calloway, joint owner. No exclamation point, no warning. Just a clean black font turning me into an accomplice. The bank required me to verify my identity in person before releasing the account history. I brought 2 forms of identification, the promissory notes, and enough organized documentation to make the branch manager sit straighter when I opened the folder. She looked from my license to the account card. "You're saying you've never accessed this account?" "I'm saying I learned it existed 3 days ago." She asked whether I knew the other owner. "He's my brother." Her expression changed, but only slightly. Bank employees are trained not to react to family disasters until they've checked the signature card. After the verification, she confirmed what the default department had said. As a named owner, I could receive the statements and account access history. I requested the complete record in one production, rather than asking month by month. When the files arrived, I sorted them by refinance. The pattern was consistent. A refinance deposit came in, then money moved out through transfers and personal expenditures controlled by my brother. There were no distributions to me. There were no documented estate expenses. There was no evidence that I had ever logged in, initiated a transaction, changed a password, or even received a notice. Every online session used my brother's contact information. Every alert went to him. Every paper statement went to the Nevada box.
He had made me an owner on paper and erased me in practice. I could have spent weeks cataloging every purchase, but that would have been emotional bookkeeping. The decisive fact was control. He received the money, he moved it, he benefited from it. I grouped the transactions under each refinance, calculated the net proceeds, and linked them to the corresponding loan documents. Red cells began replacing yellow ones. Then I pulled the latest county record. The trustee's deed had already been recorded. The bank had foreclosed and sold the house. Until that document appeared, some part of me had been treating the property as recoverable. I had imagined stopping a sale, restructuring the debt, or finding a procedural defect that might preserve the place. But the deed contained the sale date, buyer, recording stamp, and legal description. Our childhood home was not endangered. It was gone. I pictured the narrow hallway where my brother used to slide across the floor in socks. The kitchen doorframe still had pencil marks showing our heights. Mine stopped when I left for college. His continued for another 3 years because he kept insisting he was growing. I entered the sale into the ledger. Asset status, disposed through foreclosure. That phrase was easier to type than gone. The remaining exposure was $87,000, and because my name was attached to the notes, the default threatened my credit. My employer did periodic reviews for my security clearance. Unexplained delinquent debt was not merely embarrassing in my line of work. It could be treated as a vulnerability. My brother's wedding was 3 weeks away. That deadline sat in the corner of every decision. I could report the fraud immediately and let official notices reach him before the ceremony. I could confront him privately, where he could deny it, destroy whatever remained, or start calling relatives before I had finished a sentence. Or I could keep assembling the record until his version of events had nowhere left to stand. I chose the third option, partly because it was rational and partly because I was afraid to hear his voice. The Nevada box was my next problem. I had no lawful access to it, and I wasn't going to create a second legal issue while trying to document the first. I authenticated mail addressed to me and contacted the box provider through its formal process. The provider would not give me access, but it identified the lessee connected to the mail issue as my brother's former girlfriend and agreed to forward a contact request. She called 2 days later. Her first words were, "Is this about the house?" That question saved us both 10 minutes. I told her I was trying to understand why loan notices in my name had been sent to a box associated with her. She was quiet, then said, "He told me you knew." Knew what? That he was taking back his share. I asked her to explain, but she said she didn't want to do it over the phone. Instead, she sent copies of screenshots she already possessed from a shared iCloud account she still had access to. I was careful not to request credentials or ask her to retrieve anything new. I told her to send only what she already had. The screenshots included messages between her and my brother about the loans. In one, he called me the perfect patsy. In another, she asked whether I would find out.
He replied that I never looked at anything unless somebody put it in a spreadsheet. That one hurt enough that I created a new category: gray, accurate insults. The messages also contained his motive. According to him, our father had revealed that I stole the inheritance while serving as executor of Grandma's estate. The loans, he wrote, were not theft, they were repayment. He was taking back what Marcus owed. I read that sentence several times. Our father had been dead for 4 years. That made him very convenient. He could not confirm the accusation, deny it, or explain what he had meant. My brother could believe him sincerely, or he could be using a dead man as authorization. Either way, I needed to know whether there had ever been missing money.
A lawyer warned me that the screenshots had limitations. The ex-girlfriend's continued access to the shared account made their path into court ambiguous. They could help explain motive, they could challenge my brother's story inside the family, but they should not anchor a formal claim, and using them publicly carried retaliation risk. So I preserved the files and metadata, then stored them separately from the bank evidence. Purple for personal screenshots, red for authenticated bank and county records. I did not pretend the colors made them equally admissible. Then I audited Grandma's probate file. I had been executor, which meant I had kept records even before I became obsessive about them. There were probate ledgers, canceled checks, receipts, court filings, and signed beneficiary acknowledgments. I rebuilt the estate from the opening inventory to the final distribution. The house had passed under the family arrangements that gave my brother and me shared authority. The liquid assets had been distributed in equal authorized amounts. Every check cleared to the named beneficiary, every administrative expense reconciled. The closing balance reached 0, exactly where it should have.
There was no missing inheritance. I checked it twice. Then I asked the lawyer to review the reconciliation without telling him which conclusion I wanted. He reached the same total. My brother's justification was mathematically false. That did not mean he had never believed our father. Families do not require evidence before choosing a villain. But belief was not a substitute for a missing distribution, and there wasn't one. I added a slide titled Alleged Shortfall. Under it, I put one number: $0. Among the screenshots was a photograph taken at a pawn counter. My brother's wrist was visible, and so was the Rolex he had worn to Grandma's funeral. The timestamp was 2 weeks after the service. I compared it with the loan timeline. The photograph matched the date of the first missed payment on the refinanced loan. The watch had not necessarily been purchased with the loan proceeds. I could not prove that from a photograph. But the timing stripped away the story he told at the funeral. It wasn't a client's extravagant gift he cherished. It was an asset he was already trying to liquidate as the first refinance began to fail.
I placed the photograph beside the payment history and labeled its limitation clearly: personal screenshot, corroborative only. There was something almost pathetic about it. He had worn the watch like a victory banner, then stood under fluorescent pawnshop lights trying to turn it back into cash. My lawyer wanted to know what I intended to do: correct the debt, preserve my clearance, and recover the balance. That's the legal objective. What are you planning with the family? I had no answer that sounded mature. Finally, I said, a presentation. He stared at me. A PowerPoint? I don't do well with interruptions. He advised against surprising my brother at the rehearsal dinner. He explained, correctly, that public humiliation could harden the dispute and fracture relationships that might otherwise survive. He also explained that the authenticated records could support fraud claims, challenges to the debt, and recovery efforts without the screenshots. I listened. Then, I built the PowerPoint. I told myself the rehearsal dinner was practical because the relevant family members would be together. That was true. I told myself my brother had relied on their trust, so they deserved to see the evidence at the same time. That was also true. The less flattering truth was that I knew I could not confront him alone. One raised voice would send me back into silence. A projector gave me sequence and control. If I could advance the slides, I would not have to win an argument. On the eve of the dinner, I reduced nearly a decade of records to a source-labeled timeline. Slide 1,
the hospice document bearing my real signature. Slide 2, the same signature reproduced on the promissory notes. Slide 3, the 3 refinances and the increasing debt secured against the house. Slide 4, the settlement statements directing every equity disbursement to one account. Slide 5, the account opening card naming my brother and me using my social security number and listing the Nevada box. Slide 6, the transaction groups and access logs showing that he alone exercised practical control. Slide 7, the probate reconciliation proving equal authorized distributions and no missing inheritance. Slide 8, the messages calling me a patsy and describing the loans as repayment. Slide 9, the Rolex at the pawn counter beside the first missed payment.
Slide 10, the trustee's deed confirming foreclosure. Slide 11, the remaining $87,000 exposure in my name. Every slide identified its source: red footer for authenticated records, purple footer for screenshots. I was not going to blur evidence merely because the weaker material was more emotionally satisfying. Then I completed the final reconciliation. It joined the signature trail, the 3 refinances, the destination account, the transaction history, the access logs, the probate records, and the foreclosure. There was no unexplained co-user, no distribution to me, no legitimate estate expense hidden among the transfers, no missing inheritance to offset. My brother was the sole practical controller and beneficiary of the decade-long loan chain. I froze the audit. No more searches, no more late-night theories, no more opening the same statements to experience the same injury in slightly different order. Deployment only. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private room at a restaurant my brother could no longer afford if the statements were accurate. There were white flowers, gold place cards, and a projector set up for childhood photographs and wedding toasts.
I arrived early with my laptop. My brother saw it and smiled. "You're doing a slideshow?" "Yes." He thought I meant baby pictures. For the first hour, I said almost nothing. Our mother kept touching his fiancé's hand and talking about how beautiful the wedding would be. My brother worked the room with the ease I had always envied. He hugged cousins, he made our aunts laugh, he wore a different watch. When the toasts began, I connected my laptop. I stood at the front with a wireless remote in my hand. My brother leaned back in his chair, smiling as if he expected to see himself in a bathtub. The first slide showed the hospice form. "This is the signature I provided when we were arranging living expenses during hospice care," I said. My brother handled the document. The next slide showed the first promissory note. "This is the same signature on a loan I did not authorize." The room changed before anyone spoke. It was not dramatic. Forks stopped moving. My brother's fiancée looked at him, then back at the screen.
He said, "Marcus, what the hell is this?" I advanced to the refinances. 3 loans across nearly 10 years. Each increased the amount secured against the house. "Turn that off." I advanced to the settlement statements. All equity disbursements went to the same account. He stood. "You don't understand what you're looking at." I advanced to the account card. His fiancée read our names aloud. Then she read the Nevada address. My brother pointed at me. "He was executor. Ask him what happened to Grandma's money." I had rehearsed several answers to that accusation. I used none of them. I advanced to the probate reconciliation. The screen showed the opening estate balance, authorized expenses, canceled checks, beneficiary distributions, and signed acknowledgments. The final line read, "Alleged shortfall, $0, 0 cents." He said our father had told him the truth before he died. He said I had manipulated the probate. He said everyone knew I was good with numbers. I advanced to the canceled checks. One of our aunts leaned forward. "That's my signature." Another relative said, "Mine too." My brother looked around the room as if somebody else had changed the subject. "You think paperwork proves everything?" he asked. "No," I said. "Only the things recorded on it." That was the closest I came to arguing. I advanced to the account history. The refinance deposits appeared in one column. His transfers and spending appeared in another. The access log showed his email, his phone number, and his sessions. His fiancée stared at the account opening card still visible in the corner of the slide. "Did you open that account?" He said, "It was family money." "That isn't what I asked." Our mother stood and turned toward me. "Marcus, shut it off. Whatever this is, you do not do this tonight." I left the projector on. My brother seized on the screenshots when they appeared. He said they were private. He said his ex had stolen them. He said they were out of context. I agreed with part of that. The screenshots are labeled as personal source material. The bank records are not. Then I advanced back to the authenticated account card. Guests started comparing the names on it with the probate totals still summarized at the side of the screen. My brother kept disputing the purple evidence because he had no answer for the red. His fiancée asked again, "Did you open the account?" He looked at her and said, "I took what I was owed." There it was. Not a denial, not confusion, not even regret. A justification. He said Dad had known what I was. He said I had always been the responsible one, the trusted one, the one everyone believed. He said nobody ever questioned me. He had spent years watching me get credit for holding the family together while he was treated like a problem. So yes, he said, I took it back. He can afford it. The room broke in half. Somebody demanded to know how he planned to repay me. Someone else asked whether the wedding deposits had come from the account. One aunt said calling me a patsy proved intent. An uncle told me that exposing him at his rehearsal dinner was cruel, as if the date had created the debt. My brother's fiancée removed her ring. She did it quietly, with both hands, and placed it beside her untouched glass. He stopped speaking to me then. He began pleading with her. Our mother looked at the ring, then at me. Her face seemed to fold inward. "You killed my son's future," she said. I could have told her he had used mine as collateral. I could have pointed to the foreclosure deed, the default balance, the security clearance risk. I could have said the wedding was not the future he destroyed first. Instead, I advanced to the final slide. It showed the house, the foreclosure date, and the remaining balance. $87,000. My brother's fiancée left with her parents. The engagement did not survive the room. Half the family surrounded my brother, demanding repayment and explanations. The other half watched me as if I had brought a weapon to dinner. Maybe I had. My mother turned away when I approached her. I did not chase her. I closed the laptop, disconnected the cable, and packed the remote into its case. The projector went dark, but the account card had stayed on the wall long enough. The betrayal could not go back into hiding. After that, the formal process moved through lawyers and bank departments. I supplied the authenticated records. I protected my position at work. I did not use the family screenshots as the foundation of any legal claim. The house remained sold. There was no administrative language capable of reversing that. Then a certified envelope arrived. Inside was a check for exactly $87,000. No note, no apology, no explanation. I verified the issuing bank and deposited it. I told no one. At Grandma's funeral, my brother had displayed the Rolex as loudly as possible, holding up his wrist so everyone would see what he claimed someone else had given him. The repayment came without a word, precise to the dollar, with nothing attached that could be mistaken for love. For once, I did not ask him to explain. The check cleared. The house was still gone. My mother was still gone from my life. My brother and I had nothing left that resembled a relationship. But the debt was no longer mine. And in the end, his silence felt like the first honest conversation we had ever had.